Well, welcome, alumni. It's really my pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm also joined by Christina Gizzo from the Alumni Office, as well as Jeffrey Spence. Uh, if as I'm After my presentation, we'll have a Q&A session. So please use the chat function to put in any questions that you'd like, and then Jeff will mine the chat at the end, and we'll go through that. So let me share my screen. So I'd like to really spend some time talking about the medical college, how we've been navigating the pandemic, and some of the really good and fun things that we've been up to, notwithstanding all the challenges that we've had this year. I just wanted to start with a little bit of sort of personal news, but it's really Jefferson personal news. The Council of Deans of the AAMC has a leadership board called the AD Board, or the Administrative Board. And I guess my being here for 12 years, I finally caught somebody's attention, and I was just put on that board. So I'll have a little bit of a voice on the national scene now and represent our medical college there. I was also on an interesting panel recently for the Association of Pathology Chairs on coping and resiliency approaches, and I'll have something to say about that in a minute. But what we've been through here at Jefferson over the last couple of years, I think is really pretty remarkable. Uh, in 2017, we went from being a health sciences university, one of seven in the country. We merged two universities, coming together with a 135-year-old institution known for other professions: design, uh, fashion, textiles, architecture. And we pulled it off. We just went through a full Middle States accreditation, which was quite successful. You can imagine everything that goes on when you bring two universities together. New bylaws and handbooks. We restructured colleges, integrated all kinds of administrative systems, and notwithstanding it all, we have had very strong financial performance for the university. And we have been innovating. And of course, this was what was happening on the academic side, but the health system of your alma mater is not recognizable anymore. Just in the last 7, 8 years, we've gone through 5 health systems mergers. The fifth one likely to happen now with Einstein, and it really leaves us with the largest clinical footprint in the region, and huge security in terms of clinical rotations and being able to sustain the fifth largest medical school class size in the country. In the medical college, we launched a brand new JeffMD curriculum, which I will tell you a little bit about in this presentation. But I can tell you right off the bat that there's been high student satisfaction, remarkably strong step one performance. The idea here is we got rid of 50% of our lectures, so we really didn't teach to step one, and yet they're doing incredibly well. I just saw the step one for this year, and it's record setting. And at the same time, our students are matching well. And in fact, this May, we'll be celebrating the first graduating cohort that were exclusively trained on JeffMD. They came in this curriculum, and we're just incredibly proud that we've reached this milestone with these pioneering students. At the same time, we were only one of 3 universities in the region that uh, kept open during the pandemic. Now, a lot of it, our delivery was still remote, even for students who were here on campus. And we developed what we called a high flex educational model, where every course had significant online components coupled to in-person components, and essentially allowed the flexibility to flip in either direction. And what we did in the medical college was pretty remarkable, and I'll comment on that. And then remember, we've got this big research enterprise, and we've kept that humming and growing, expanding the programmatic science, even continuing to host major national scientific symposia, of course, virtual at this stage. Uh, for for us, the pandemic proved something. A lot of people have been talking about this notion that in-person education is obsolete for universities, that online triumphs. But as far as I'm concerned, the pandemic proved something quite different. To us, it's proved that students crave a campus experience. Now, notwithstanding that, we're never going to go back fully to the where it was. There are just certain things that are better delivered remotely. We'll have to think twice about certain lecture formats, whether they really need to be in person ever again. But yet, it's absolutely proven that students want to be together. Human beings are social beings, and they want to be with each other. Uh, there's also another uh, part of this pandemic, and I've been saying that we will all be a bit post-traumatic. Now, obviously, most of us are managing to function and continue on, but underneath that layer, there is a bit of trauma that's happened here. And I think we have to recognize that, and clawing our way out of this, even when it starts to become safer, will be important, will be a challenge psychologically, I think. And even though this is far from certain, extreme traumas, unless you were directly affected, and so many were, where it really was trauma. But even so, there's much to be learned from how one deals with trauma. And people talk about reconstructing the trauma story, that you sort of have to grapple with what has happened. And there's this notion of mentally compartmentalizing. It's not Freudian repression. It's still there, but you have to sort of sequester it in one part of your brain, if you will, and then just go on with life and move forward. There's this great quote that from a 1993 article: "People are remarkably resilient in the face of adversity. Individuals often emerge from a crisis with new coping skills, closer relationships with family and friends, broader priorities, and a richer appreciation for life. Accordingly, investigators need to consider the possibility of a new and better level of adaptation that reflects personal growth rather than a return to the status quo." And that's really how we're approaching it with our students, with our faculty, and our staff. We have to deal with it. Let's compartmentalize it, and to whatever extent possible, let's actually grow out of it and be ever more resilient. We've been creating publications, and we're really keyed in on this issue of wellness for our students in particular. You can see here promoting well-being in the learning environment, and some pages from inside that pamphlet that we distributed. So we're all in, all keyed in. We're obviously also keyed in for our residents and fellows. They've really been through and are going through a grinder here. So we're really paying attention to this issue of wellness, well-being in a lot of different ways. At the same time, we are taking the 200-year perspective of our medical college and saying, how do we continue to advance it forward? Uh, Many of you, most of you should be familiar with some of these things, because these were things that preceded me, that Joe Ganella and my other dean predecessors had built over the years. The Center for Research and Medical Education, which we're incredibly proud of, the longest longitudinal assessment of medical education outcomes of any med school in the country. The Physician Shortage Area Program. We've trained more physicians who practice in rural areas of the Commonwealth than any other of the medical schools. Our Penn State program, and of course, the Jefferson Center for Interprofessional Education. But in the last couple of years, we've gone much further. We gave departmental status, the first in the country, to integrative medicine and nutritional sciences. It's a freestanding department in the medical college. With our new campus in the Atlantic Health Branch campus up in northern Jersey, this gave us an opportunity to experiment with a longitudinally integrated curriculum where students track and follow the same set of patients through all their clinical years. It's not rotating through surgery and medicine, et cetera. Obviously, it's a very small subset of our medical college, but it's an important one that we do. We've launched a track with Cattolica, one of the premier medical schools in Europe, in Rome, where we're going to train into the international global physicians of the future. So we have created a pathway where students could get an MD from the US and an MD for the European Union, essentially allowing them to practice anywhere in the world. And that's particularly relevant in a world of telehealth. And then my passion project has been co-curriculum, this idea of medicine plus, and that's part of our new Jeff MD curriculum. So what prompted us to put out this new curriculum? Well, there's a lot of disruptors. Let's remember the students that are in our medical college right this minute will be in the hearts of their careers in 2050, 2060, even into 2070 or 2080. Uh, there's no way that medical practice, healthcare delivery is going to look anything like it looks now out there. And there are these disruptors, not only the clinical innovation in diagnostics, therapeutics, and care delivery, but there'll be this ever relentless push towards fostering well-being as opposed to thinking in terms of diseases. And there are the non-physician providers, and then there's this burgeoning, looming machine intelligence robotics. And the attitude that we have at our medical college is don't resist the disruptors. Don't think you can just sort of push them aside and make believe they're not happening. Quite the contrary, let's embrace them. It's good for our patients, and then it challenges us to enrich physicians' roles. And that means all providers functioning to full potential of their degrees, ever expanding, and that's true for physicians. So really, in our launching Jeff MD, we were driven by this sort of vision for medical education. And the idea is, let's draw on the best of Flexner, medicine as science, and Osler, medicine as art, but transcend their dialectic. And it's more than just words. We really are bringing this to life. Provide creative and flexible training pathways for a broader set of career pathways. Our students will be engaging with society and patients in a far broader set of possibilities for them. And we want to prepare them for that. And then, of course, given the rate of knowledge growth, expect lifelong learning across a continuum of medical education. And then trying to say, what will physicians in the age of machine intelligence be doing? I've sort of come up with this notion of 4C physician. No matter what AI there is, physicians will still be the consultant to the patients. They'll be the comforter for the patients. They'll be coordinating care with the highest level degree in the healthcare arena. And they'll also be the creatives, the creators of new medical care and knowledge. And so when you think in those terms, the 4C physician has to be powered by, yes, competencies, which has been what the focus on the national scene has been through AAMC, but those competencies have to be broadened. But we have to start thinking now in much broader way about human qualities. We often talk about empathy. There's the Jefferson empathy scale, but that's just like 101 stuff. We have to think about human qualities in a much broader way. Leadership qualities, spiritual qualities, many other qualities. And then there's this notion of ways of thinking. Our combining, for instance, of medicine plus design is the design thinking way of thinking, data science as a way of thinking. And so there's a lot of deep thought that many of us at the medical college have been giving to just what we mean by those feeders into what this notion. So out of this came the Jeff MD curriculum. The name actually came from the students back a couple of years ago. We now talk about 3 phases. The first phase now has been shortened. Instead of the usual first 2 years, the preclinical phase is 22 months, but with deeply early embedded clinical experience in a meaningful way. Phase 2 is pretty much similar to what we used to do as the 3rd year, but again, with a lot of innovations. And then the phase 3 is completely rethought. Instead of that last year, it's now a last year plus, but it's really been powered in a variety of other ways. And throughout it all, we have now introduced a requirement of every one of our 270 plus students in each class to do a scholarly inquiry project. And then we have these themes that run through things like health services science and ethics. Scholarly inquiry was not a small undertaking for us because when you got 270 students times 4 classes, and every one of them's got a project and you've got to track them and all of that, this was sort of like a moon landing. But our crew, the deans and the medical college, have done an astounding job here in giving life to this. And I'm not going to walk you through these statistics, but even early in the first 2 years, the number of publications coming from our medical students really is extraordinarily impressive. This year was the first year we did phase 3, right? Because this is the year that the cohort in their 4th year are coming through and will be graduating. And we, as I said, we completely rethought phase 3 this last year. Of course, there's the usual medicine sub-internship, but we've now created a very structured, formal outpatient experience. We've created a 2-week critical care. And importantly, we have brought back the basic sciences from phase 1 into what we call an advanced basic science that we do for 2 weeks. And it's been really deeply thought out by the dean staff. Gateway internship continues the tradition that Jefferson-trained medical students are seen as some of the best prepared students by residency programs. To this day, I'll typically get a call from the Hopkinses of the world, Hopkins itself, telling me that they wanted me to know that the students coming from our med school, once again, are just exemplary and have stood out. And then electives, pathway recommendations, and then that scholarly inquiry has a longitudinal component to it. And in this phase 3, students immerse themselves in one of 4 tracks shown in the right in terms of family medicine, pediatric surgery. By no means does this exclude early immersion in other subspecialties. I myself came from one of those other specialties. And we're innovating. So one challenge that I've laid out for myself and for the other deans for the next 5 to 10 years is there a way we could do away, and the country could do away with the step exams, make them obsolete? Here's an exam where the students are like stressed. It's a summative exam. They're cramming for 2 months and then they're over with it and they forget most of it. Is there a way of tracking in real time, longitudinally, their experiences, how they performed on various quizzes and tests? And could that be predictive of how they will perform later in residencies? Obviously, we can't get away the step exams until that happened at the national level, but the idea is to produce a body of scholarship over the next 5 to 10 years using our Center for Research and Medical Education around it. And so the various faculty and deans have now created 6 different apps where we literally can track just about anything. This competency assessment tool for competencies. Given our strength in interprofessional education at Jefferson, we have this JTOG app, the Teamwork Observation Guide, where they record every exposure they have. An app for tracking learning environment and professionalism. Jeff Rate, respect and teaching evaluation. We can identify the great teachers, the problematic ones in real time, because things are being logged in on their handhelds in real time. A direct observation tool, and a mental well-being assessment tool. So we are going to be gathering huge amounts of data from all of our students over time, over the coming years. And by the way, that's the focus is on UME. GME is something that we're also starting to think about. How could we log the residents' experiences and then tie the UME data to GME data and come up with that? This is just an example of the front page of a JeffCat report for an individual student. We can literally now dive down and say, okay, Jane, the function of the distal tubules in the kidney was on 4 different questions on 4 different tests and quizzes, and you seem to be having a problem with that. You might want to key in on that. And I think part of the reason that our students are hitting it out of the park on the step exams is they're now armed with tools such as this that lets them identify in a way where their gaps are, their knowledge gaps are, and then key in on that. Now, I know some of the alumni have been asking about, what has the pandemic been? How has the medical college faced up to this, the challenges of this pandemic? So let me just say a couple of things here. It's just astounding. Frankly, it's astounding what the faculty have done in addressing this pandemic. Uh, General measures, students, we don't treat COVID-19 positive or patients that are under investigation. When we were still trying to sort out what was going on back in March, April, early May, we had pulled the students from all clinical rotations. So we were one of the first medical schools to pull students from rotations, but then we became one of the first med schools to bring them back on when we could do that safely and we knew we could have a credible learning environment. Virtual clinical and educational experiences implemented over several rotations, incredible creativity shown. And in fact, a lot of these virtual teaching products have been made available to the Council of Deans and AAMC as models of how this can be, and there will be publications around it. Course directors ensured proper social distancing on rotations. Student received PPE, personal protective equipment, and training. And I mentioned that direct observation tool. Well, we used it, Jeff Dott, to actually train students in the proper donning of their face masks. And then in phase 3, there are a whole series of COVID-related changes. So what I'm trying to say is every aspect of education, both remote and in person, has really been rethought in dramatic ways. You can see here, for instance, in the sub-I, to decompress, we had night rotations, virtual rounding, outpatient experience, remote epic access, telehealth training. In the critical care area, expanded to include additional blocks, med mastery online modules, and so on. So our faculty, our educators in the medical college have really risen to the challenge. And I'm just unbelievably proud of the team doing this under considerable duress. I do want to say just a word here on, and I am coming to nearing a close for the presentation. But let me just say that, I mentioned co-curriculum, right? Jeff MD is sort of core curriculum, but then what is the enrichment? And co-curriculum is really something that some students take, but not all of them. And part of it has been enriching our scholarly inquiry tracks that I mentioned. Soon after I got here 12 years ago, I launched a college within the college in areas like translational research and population health. And we've now grown Medicine Plus to cover a variety of areas: Medicine Plus design, plus humanities, plus data sciences, plus policy. Some students, different students take different tracks to cultivate this. And we've now started assured admission linkages. So we started with Princeton for students rising, for second-year students at undergraduates at Princeton. We would assure admission to our medical college if they immersed themselves in our Medicine Plus design track while they were still undergraduates. We've now extended that. We've added Rochester, the Gergen Institute for the Data Sciences. We've added Yale recently, Swarthmore and Haverford in policy. Washington and Jefferson, our namesake, linked in a assured admission linkage around the humanities. So there's a lot of ferment. And I'll tell you, on that Medicine Plus design track, we've had 15 startup companies come from second-year med students working now with designs, often with design students, industrial design students, textile students. And it's just, I think, just a lot of remarkable creativity that's been bubbling up. And of course, there's the extracurricular, right? Going out, the community service. And again, our students have been amazing. And this is meant just for a visual perspective, to give you a sense of just the rich set of extracurricular activities. Many of these activities are driven by students. So we have over 90% engagement of our medical students in one or another of the community outreach programs. Obviously, Jeff Hope is the centerpiece, but we have refugee health partners, Give Kids Sight Days, Puentes de Salud, and the list goes on. I just want to say something quickly about research, because that is key here. We have, and I only show the data from 2017, but we have, since I got here, we have more than doubled the extramural research funding of Jefferson. And in no small part, it was done by growing programmatic grants. When I got here, there was one programmatic grant. You see, in 2017, we had 34. Now we're up to 53. And you can see for this year, our total direct plus indirect is now over 200 million. We've been driving submissions, and it's it's an incredible success story for us. And I literally found out a half hour ago, so I added it to the slide in the bottom right. Steve McMahon has tallied it, and we have over 150 publications to date on COVID-19 from our faculty across a huge swath of our faculty. So we have really moved forward to stand that up. And similarly here on the clinical research front, a remarkable dramatic growth. Just key in on NIH clinical trials in fiscal year 16-13, fiscal year 2039. Industry revenue, again, doubling from 8.2 million to 16.7 million. And when I talk about programmatic science and team science, it's around these themes. And we do have our own horse in the COVID-19 race. It's a little bit of a tortoise. The hares were the RNA vaccines, and now the DNA vaccines based on adenovirus. But we are convinced our vaccine will be one of the winners, and certainly a solution where people have to be revaccinated to boost, as well as for most of the 7.8 billion people on planet Earth. And ours is a more conventional platform based on a viral vector. We call it Coravax. It's simply taking a rabies virus vaccine, which has been proven safe and effective in hundreds of millions of people. And we just expressed on it one extra antigen, the S1 antigen of COVID-19. And so we fully expect this will give long-term protection. It'll be safe for all population groups. It's, the rabies vaccine is safe for pregnant women and children. It doesn't require refrigeration. It's easy to reconstitute anywhere, manufacturing instruction. And we have licensed it to one of the world's largest vaccine manufacturers in India, Bharat Biotech. I think they're not going to use our Coravax name, so they'll probably bring it out under Cororab. And the first patients are slated to go into trials by the end of this month. So again, we're still a couple of months away, but it's, it will, when it hits, I'm confident it will do things. And the data that Matthias Schnell, who runs our vaccine center and is our chair of micro and immuno, is just astounding. I mean, basically, unlike some of these other vaccines, it truly won't let you be a super spreader because it protects your nasal turbinates and your lung from challenge, months after immunization. There are others, we've built up this computational medicine center. Jefferson, because of it, is now considered one of the top 5 in the country, maybe the world, in pioneering small RNA biology with the likes of Isidora Gutsos and Yohai Carino and Eric London. High-profile papers coming out recently around that work. Another example is work that we're doing through Scott Waldman, our chair of pharmacology, who has got incredibly exciting program going on for GI cancer immunotherapy, which we're feeling very good and confident about. I just want to end with, with 2 slides here. We've been on sort of a push now as we've reconstituted the alumni board to find ever more effective ways of connecting alumni with our students. One of them is a recent program, which the students have named Med Talks, where essentially we have 15-minute, on different topics, we have 15-minute talks on a variety of topics. You see here, selecting your specialty, life and medicine, physician wellness, given by members of the alumni board. And then it goes into breakout sessions where you have a couple of alumni with the students, and they talk about that topic and have an interchange. So far, 45 alumni for 14 states have hosted breakout rooms. 132 students have attended, and We're very excited that we're onto something great here. And I urge all of you to just join us for this. I think you'll find it very gratifying. And it's certainly a way to connect to our medical students moving forward. Back a few years back, we started our alumni host program. And the idea was to connect fourth year students with alumni during residency interviews. And the idea was to, lessen stress and financial burden associated with residency interviews. Up until COVID, alumni, especially regional alumni outside of the tri-state area, would provide overnight stays in their homes, rides to and from airport, shared meals and conversations, essentially adopting one of our students during that period. And just amazing gesture by alumni and incredibly appreciated by our students. As the pandemic, is with us, it's been transformed into an all virtual program with alumni and students connecting by phone and video chat. Over 200 alumni from across the country have volunteered to participate. We are going to be pushing this, really hard among our students to get a growing number of them there. So I hope that gives you a little bit of a perspective on where we've been and how we are moving forward amidst all the challenges. And it's really an exciting time. So I'll turn it back to Jeff for some back and forth here.
Thank you, Dr. Tykocinski. It's clear that there's a lot of exciting things happening within the college and within the university. We invite all of our attendees to share any questions you have using the Q&A button located on your screen. If you don't see it, just try moving your mouse, it should appear. And to kick things off, Dr. Tykocinski, one of the questions that we have is about students taking maybe a gap year. This alumnus has heard about students taking a year off before starting medical school. Have you seen anything in trends related to that? Is it mostly the student driving it? And do you have any advice on what you think is best there?
Yeah, well, we can talk about pre-COVID and then what trends that we're seeing during the pandemic. I think in general, there have been episodic students taking a year off before admission, but for us it hasn't been a very big trend at all. Also understand that our student body, incoming students, often I don't know, I can't remember the exact percentage, I should ask Clara, but probably over half our students are not coming straight from undergraduate, have had different life experiences. In fact, we encourage that. So that means when they're accepted, they've already been out there doing stuff, and then there can be a gap there. Increasingly, because of the college within college translational research push, et cetera, we have had a growing number of students take a year out, some of them to do research experiences at NIH, which we encourage, and others for other reasons. But again, it's by the number, it's really a minority of our students. Now, this year, what we did see was an unusual spike, and it's not hard to understand why, perhaps, of rising fourth year students that decided to take a gap year. And I think just many of these, and again, it's not by the percentage, it's not huge, but it was probably in the order of 15 or 20 students. It was a little tough because some of them made that decision pretty late, so we couldn't refill those slots, and there went those tuitions. But I think some of the students just didn't want to be in the residency interview cycle, in the midst of a pandemic where it would all be done virtually. And the gap year, I trust, is being used productively by those students.
Wonderful. Our next question refers to with the pressures from physician extenders emerging as providers and advanced AI capabilities. What do you think the future of the non-specialist holds?
Well, I think that's why I had that productive, that provocative slide on what the future physician and the 4C physician is. So whoever asked that question, do reach out to me, and I'll be glad go out, post-pandemic on a dinner with you and speculate on that. But let me just say a couple of things. There's going to be a huge change, right? And so if you're asking me to be a futurist, I'll be the futurist. And I think it's pretty clear that the notion of the physician as sort of this master diagnostician who miraculously pieces things together and comes up with a diagnosis probably is going to fade a bit. I think it's not unreasonable to think that in 20 years, the patient coming in will first be seen by one of the, by an NP or a PA. Even before they see them, they'll enter data maybe while they're still home, and the test to be done will be driven. And so they'll come in and they'll already be, a diagnosis with a 98% confidence interval. So there's a certain number of those patients, the chances that a strep patient will come in and be seen by an MD probably will go down. I'm not saying it's a good thing, because very often that visit, uncovers very important things. But the reality is, will the payers continue to do that? So I think there's a certain amount of it that'll go away. But the physician still is going to play an incredibly critical role, right? Because they're still connecting. They're still what I call the 4C, the comforter. Anything that's a more complex, you're going to have not 2 or 3 or 5, but you're going to have 50 biologics for rheumatoid arthritis, right? And they're only going to vary by tiny percentages, on the computer screen for AI. Who's going to make that decision? Who guides you through that? How does that integrate with the rest of your life? So that's what I mean by the C, that's the consultant, and that sort of thing. And by the way, the notion that the specialists will be protected, I don't think they're any more protected. Maybe there are certain super specialty areas. I think, robotics will go to a whole other level. Literally this week, we had external reviewers in reviewing our dermatology department. We review every department every 6 years. And I asked them, these are top chairs from around, the very top, medical institutions around the country. And I asked them, what do you think the future of dermatology is? Well, they think that, the biopsy is going to give way to, the ability in a Star Trek mode to just simply visualize, and through the multi-layer imaging, and I don't remember all the imaging technology, essentially, you're going to create a virtual biopsy, in the office instantly. Right. Well, that dramatically changes where derm path is, for example. So I think specialty areas, primary care areas, they're all going to be deeply impacted. But at least I remain convinced that the physician will be required as much as ever. Now, and let me just say one other thing here. I do have a bit of a different view, I must admit, than leadership at AAMC, if I could say. And I've had this conversation. They've been pushing very hard over the last 2 decades to increase the number of med schools, the size of med schools. They keep talking about the physician shortage. And I just have this sense that they haven't completely figured out all the work that's going to migrate away from MDs to NPs and PAs. Remember, I'm also provost, so I'm as vested in PA and NP as I am in MD, wearing my other hat. And I think, so I think MDs are going to be employed for this coming century, well employed. But what they do, how they do what they do is going to be different. And at Jefferson, we're, pioneering that. We're not trying to make believe that's not going to happen and burying our head in the sand. And that's what Jeff MD and our new curriculum is about, teaching students those higher level analytic skills, synthetic knowledge skills, communication skills, leadership skills, and of course, diagnostic and therapeutic knowledge to function in a far more advanced kind of way.
Thank you. It certainly is a changing world. We have a couple of questions asking about our MD, PhD students and whether or not we're seeing growth in applications from those students, and if you have any sense of the number of students we have currently.
Yeah, that's a terrific question. So, so that is one of, I think I'd have to say that's an area of opportunity. What we don't have at Jefferson, and we're on a journey to get there, but we don't have a formal MSTP program where essentially we would have NIH Fed dollars to leverage that, right? Because there's a significant cost that goes with the research years that for these medical students. However, we do have the MD PhD track. Generally, we have around 5 or 6 students, so it's very modest in size, and I would love to see it grow. But the question is, how do you finance that? And so that's the challenge. I would love to have scholarship support for that. So if any of you alumni out there, I'm not allowed to pitch at this webinar, but certainly that is would be a wonderful philanthropic opportunity for you to help us grow that. But we very much want to do that. We're on a journey so we can launch an MSTP program, and that would allow us to grow this considerably in size.
Wonderful. I can pitch it, so feel free to reach out to the alumni office at any time. It's a discuss funding opportunity.
Sure. Okay, great.
But Dr. Tykocinski, one of the questions that we received relates to the student curriculum and really the rise of technology. Do our students, are they using hardback textbooks anymore? Have they really become tech dependent? And how do you see that evolving?
Well, for that one, I just have to tell you an anecdote. So I'm fortunate to have 4 children, 3 girls, and my youngest is a boy. And my 2 older ones, which are 2 daughters, went to medical school. And of course, coming from the world of pathology and lab medicine, I was given these, brand new complimentary big textbooks, including Rubin, which is Jefferson's, and then the competitor. And I gave it to them, and then sort of towards the end of second year, they ended up both in the same medical school class. And at the end of second year, this is a number of years ago, and the binding were still fresh. So based on that experience, I think there are a subset of students doing it, but I think a lot of it, we provide, from all of our lectures, detailed curriculum notes, et cetera. So I think it's a mixed bag, and I can't answer that directly. I don't really have the pulse. If Steve Herron were here at my side, he probably would give you the statistic around that. But I would say that it's very different than when I was in medical school, where we lived and breathed by those texts, and they had no bindings by the time we were done.
Sure, of course. Could you speak to what's being done to promote student wellness and some of the efforts that are being done there?
Yeah, and this is really tough. So let's just the horrific fact is our profession is plagued by suicide. Not only physicians who are out there in practice. So obviously that is the extreme end of burnout, and but we are finding just too much of that happening among residents and even among medical students. I mentioned that I'm on the ad board for the Council of Deans. Well, there was just a grouping of deans on this call. I don't think there were more than about 18 or 20 of us, and two of them, this was I think in April, had described students within the last month who had done that. So that is what I live in terror of, to tell you the truth. I really do. So we're as keyed as we can be. There's part of our advantage in the medical school is under the new curriculum. We're deeply case-based learning, small group, groups of 10 students. So, and even when was being done remotely and then in person, it gives us, really a way to observe students, to detect if there are any overt issues. So that's one sentinel that we use. And I think that the fact that our students are so deeply engaged in community service work, in the co-curricular activities, is a way to keep them engaged so you don't have students sort of straying off and going into their sort of own little universes where bad things can happen. We have seen we've been pushing hard for students to do visits to our mental health clinic, and fortunately we've seen a significant, not, I wouldn't say it's dramatic, but it is a significant increase in students, and we see that as a good thing. We're encouraging students, and this is of course not just in the medical college, but it's true across the university as well. And then there's all kinds of special programming and fun event nights and things, so we're trying to spice up the experience around that. And then I showed you the bullet we handed out. There's, in addition to all the activities and organized sports activities, just trying to keep students very engaged. The students my heart goes out to the most, frankly, is our first years, right? Because they've never gotten to experience the real, Sidney Kimmel Medical College, Jefferson, right? Yet it's all behind a mask and so much remote. At least the second year students had some time to experience it maskless. But hopefully we'll get beyond this pandemic, and we'll flip back into a state of normalcy again.
Hopefully. And I think to wrap things up, we have a two-part question, really dealing with our healthcare delivery at Jefferson. One is, can you speak to the development of the specialty care pavilion, how that might impact health delivery and students? And if you're able to, speak at all to Jefferson's rollout of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines and the progress made there?
Sure. Well, there's two very separate questions, but let me do them in sequence. So, to you alumni, this is not the Jefferson that you graduated from. Back when I got here in the end of 2008, we were 3 hospitals, one of which was really just an extension hospital, Jefferson Hospital of Neuroscience. We were there part of the old Jefferson Health System alongside Mainline Health. And we were eclipsed by that medical school across the river from us, across the Schuylkill. Boy, things have changed. I said we merged with Abington, merged with ARIA, merged with Kennedy Health System, with McGee, and now with Einstein looming, and the regulators now giving the green light to allow that merger to happen. So we'll now be about 18 hospitals, and by far and away the largest clinical footprint in the region, significantly larger, once the Einstein merger than Penn. And so that gives us a set of stability, and most importantly, it gives us the security that we can continue to have a large medical school class, and we're not at the mercy. Because if we lost we don't want to lose, because we treasure every one of our clinical affiliates, but at least we have a little bandwidth there. As part of all of that, we're rationalizing hospitals, figuring out what's done where, and whereas Penn across the river has invested a tremendous amount into this new hospital building, our big play is on ambulatory care, and ambulatory surgery. And so the specialty care pavilion is just an incredibly exciting project now to position us at the future of where healthcare is going. And it's not just a line. Steve Klasko, our president, has incredible ties and reach, including to Silicon Valley. Scully, the former CEO, is now helping us raise funds for this. And he has said, this will be like no other ambulatory building before. It doesn't come with a cheap price tag, but it'll be a signature architectural beaming. And more importantly, the design inside will be amazing. We have a new leader for our clinical enterprise the last couple of years, Bruce Meyer, who came from UT Southwestern. And he's just doing a fantastic job, he and his team, to give life to our whole new strategy for the clinical enterprise, as well as specifically for the care pavilion. Now, the other question on vaccines, my favorite topic, I said something about our horse in the race. The reality is that the way Operation Warp Speed played out, priority was given and the funding was given, and we could have a discussion over a drink probably on the wisdom of this, to the pioneering vaccines where there's no long-term data. Okay, so this is in reality perhaps the largest clinical experiment in human history, right? Millions upon millions of people vaccinated. Now we know short term it looks quite safe, and we pray that that will hold. But again, this is not proven technology. We're at Jefferson, we're all in. We had to protect our clinical faculty, our general faculty. We haven't students who are in clinical facing areas, all of the staff, nursing staff, et cetera. And so we've been pushing forward in the use of the RNA vaccines, and it has been a very successful campaign, in part too because the timing for the adenoviral vaccines, which are basically DNA vaccines being delivered through an adenovirus, it was unclear what their timing. They seem that they'll be catching up now, and unclear timing for the more conventional Novavax protein vaccines. Again, the long-term winners, I believe, will be on the truly well-established vaccine platforms, which are the viral vector vaccines, and that's why Matthias Schnell and his group continue to push that particular vaccine. To answer the question specifically, we didn't have any role at all. It was pioneered by someone who had been at Penn, in the RNA vaccine world. So we'll take our credit when CoroVac/CoroRab makes it out there, and I'm predicting we'll get our day in the limelight. So because 7.8 billion people will not be vaccinated with Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. It's just a complete impossibility in terms of distribution, cost, requirements for freezing, refrigeration, and all of that. So, and it's not cost effective. So, and ours will be the vaccine for the global community, and I believe for the United States, because when we have to be vaccinated for new, antigen escape variants, we'll have to do that. That's a bit more than was asked in the question, but I want to make sure our alumni get, all the extras.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Dr. Tykocinski. I think we certainly shared a lot this evening, and we welcome you to continue to connect with us and connect with the alumni office and with each other and with our students. We invite you to sign on to our brand new Jefferson Alumni Network, our online alumni directory, where you can search for fellow Jefferson alumni by region, class year, medical specialty, and more. If you register by February 14th, you'll be entered in our weekly prize drawings, and you can do that at alumninetwork.jefferson.edu. We also hope a lot of you will join us at our many upcoming virtual programs. We have highlighted 3 here, including our Finding Your Voice Alumni Workshop, which will be led by alumna Ginny Palmieri, who will really help you to find and use your authentic voice in your professional life and beyond. We have a talk with Evan Lane, who's the faculty director of the Arlen Specter Center here at Jefferson, on policy over party and the legacy of Senator Specter. And then on March 18th, we have our Emmy Award-winning alumna Kim Wana, who will be talking about scene decoration in Hollywood and how you can apply some of those same techniques to your own home and your own space. So we hope you'll join us. Sign up at jefferson.edu/alumni events. Thank you again, Dr. Tykocinski, and thank you to everyone who joined us tonight.
Great. Thanks to everyone, and please keep safe. Thank you.